being queer with something that's wrong in our society.
A lot of people from the queer community feel very ashamed to explore their own body and understand what they like, what they don't like.
Not being comfortable with their own body stops them from exploring their own pleasure points.
So when two queer people come together, what can partners do for each other and make the experience enjoyable for themselves?
If the answer is no, respect that answer, respect those boundaries, and try and be there for your partner in other ways, not necessarily in the way that you want.
Hello and welcome to The Pleasure Principle. This is your go-to zone for a detailed chat on the science, soul, and sass of intimacy. And pleasure is not something that is a one-size-fits-all. It's not about the size, and it's not also about your orientation. Joining me today is Dr. Mansi. Welcome to the show again, ma'am.
Thank you, Jyotika. Thanks for
It's such a pleasure talking to you. And I would like to tell you that Dr. Mansi is a practicing psychiatrist, and she has an experience of over a decade. Dr. Mansi, this time we're talking about the queer pleasure. Let's talk about, is queer pleasure different from people who are straight?
Yes, it's a known fact that sometimes, there can be a difference in the way you feel pleasure, and that's because of multiple reasons. Because societal messages are sometimes conflicted and not very positive for the queer community. Also, you don't grow up seeing a lot of representation of queer intimacy, as you are growing up. Along with that, a sense of shame and guilt or external messages or, traumatic experiences leads to this non-acceptance of your authentic self. So because of which they might experience intimacy and pleasure differently. There's a lot of guilt and shame that queer people might carry into their relationships before they kind of come to a level of self-acceptance. So that's how it's different compared to most people.
And I would think that the shame about your identity would also stop them from living a full life, a wholesome life, and experiencing pleasure the way they should be able to.
Yes, because the acceptance is so difficult. A lot of people choose not to kind of, go through that journey. They would rather kind of be untrue to their authentic self just to kind of fit into the social norms. So that's what makes it more difficult. So first you have to get them to accept themselves, after which there's another battle of, getting the society, your friends, your parents, your family to accept you. So that becomes very challenging.
I want to actually tell you about a friend of mine who is from the LGBTQAI plus community. He was on a dating app for queer people, and he met somebody and he thought that person was wonderful, and they had a very nice dinner. And when they were leaving, my friend asked this person when they could meet again, and he said, "Oh, I don't know, because you know what, I have a wife and kids."
Yes.
And my friend was so taken aback, because till that point of time my friend had no idea that this person is married and living a life, a completely different full life, where he was not able to accept the fact that he is not cisgender. Yes. And obviously my friend didn't reach out to that person again, because obviously cheating is not something that my friend wanted to do.
Yes, it's a very common experience that you go through, or you come across rather, that people have this parallel life going on where they've completely suppressed their authentic identity and they're continuing to live a life which is more conventional or fits into the societal norm, especially of a few years earlier. Now the society is changing. We see a lot of youngsters having more courage to come out, or at least explore themselves and go through that journey. But I think for a few years back, a lot of people didn't have that option because of the societal norms, and it's a very, very common experience. People already having, like they're married and they're having children, but they don't identify with that orientation. They identify for different orientation and they continue through life. It's just a sad reality that's out there.
Also, let's talk about self-exploration. A lot of people from the queer community feel very ashamed to explore their own body and understand what they like, what they don't like. Is that correct?
That is correct, and that's because of the social messages that you get while growing up many a times, right? Because we associate being queer with something that's wrong in our society very often. It's not as openly accepted. A lot of queer people will experience sense of shame, sense of guilt. They might not be comfortable with their own body. So not being comfortable with their own body stops them from exploring their own pleasure points or, their own pleasure principles for that matter.
So that was actually my next question. How does being disconnected from your own body reflect in your sexual wellness?
if you're not connected with your body, you're not going to know what you like, you're not going to know what you dislike. And that often happens when you've had traumatic experiences as a kid, that you are not aware of what exactly is something that's enjoyable and what is just a part of an experience that's happening to you, not necessarily a consensual experience. So because of that, we see that a lot of dissociative kind of symptoms. So basically your body is present but your mind is not in that experience. That's what a lot of people with traumatic childhood experiences, or people with the body mind disconnect, they experience.
So when two queer people come together, what can partners do for each other? Non-binary partners do for each other to make their partners feel comfortable and make the experience enjoyable for themselves also.
So the most important thing would be to communicate, to talk to your partner, to understand what are their desires, what are their fears, right? Many a times partners will be much more open about expressing what they like, but they might not express what they dislike. So that's something that's important to know. Ask for consent. It's something that needs to be a journey. It cannot be something that you assume that is there. Also ask them that, is this something that they find pleasurable and acceptable? If the answer is no, respect that answer, respect those boundaries, and try and be there for your partner in other ways, not necessarily in the way that you want. That's not the only answer or the only solution.
Right. Like we were saying, it's a little trickier for the queer community because the acceptance of the queer people is something that the society still struggles with. But a lot of them have some very traumatic and bitter experiences from their past. So what can they do to get over those experiences and live a wholesome life?
Yeah, so you rightly pointed out that the acceptance is something that's, still a journey. It's not completely there, but it's not only from the society. Very often we see people themselves struggling with accepting themselves. So, they might know their orientation, but they refuse to kind of come out, or they don't feel comfortable exploring that journey. And that is a first sign that you're not comfortable or not accepting of your own self. So that is something that needs to be worked upon. If there have been experiences of childhood trauma, right? That could be revolving around your orientation, or it could not be revolving around your identity. In either case, it's going to affect how you engage with other people. And that's why it's important to work on those traumas. Therapy is one thing that genuinely helps with this. Besides therapy, besides talk therapy, there are a lot of somatic therapies, what we call as body focused therapies, that help you release the old trauma that you are carrying in your body. If there's a traumatic experience, what's going to happen is that when you are indulging in intimacy, be it emotional, be it physical, that's going to be a visceral, involuntary kind of a response, which will stop you from proceeding further. So your fears kind of kick in, and your mind and body don't allow you to feel that comfortable progressing in that journey. So that is when the role of therapies come in, so that you can, experience everything that is out there and have a journey of your own, rather than letting your fears dictate what you're experiencing and what you're not experiencing.
And there are so many cases also of assaults and other shameful experiences that queer community goes through. How to get past that?
So, assault is something that's very serious. More than that, what we see very often is the simple, teasing and bullying, the name calling that begins, right?
Yeah.
And that still continues. Even if you might be in a safe environment, you might still experience that on and off. And that's something that, affects the way you look at yourself. So, if it's a toxic environment, ideally the solution would be to stand up, to kind of, seek for help, seek support, and address that. And if it is something that's already occurred in the past and you've had the traumatic experience or the bad experience, then talking to someone, looking out for support, connecting with people who've had similar experiences. So, turning your past adversities or adverse experiences into your current strengths, that's something that can be done with the help of therapy.
Right. And how do partners come in here? Like, how can queer partners talk to each other openly to make each other feel comfortable and accept each other and themselves better?
Start with a non-judgmental space, right? You might not understand why your partner likes something and does not like something, or why your partner is not willing to see things from your point of view. But that also begins when you see things from their point of view. Have an open conversation and ask for consent. These are the three things that are the basic requirements to create a safe space for your partner, so that you can support them in this journey together. I understand it's not about an individual, but unless we make it about a partner, unless we make it about that individual, as a couple, it's difficult to have that progress.
Right. And is there a roadmap that, queer people can follow to live a better life and enjoy their relationships better?
I think it starts with, first exploring yourself, understanding yourself, and accepting your own identity. And secondly, is to engage with people in a respectful manner, right? So, extending the same empathy that you would extend to others to yourself as well. So, being non judgmental and non critical of self, as well as when you're interacting with others and engaging with others in any form of intimacy, being respectful, asking for consent, and, progressing with caution. That's something, that's a basic, I feel.
As a society, we don't talk too much about sex and pleasure and identifying your own needs. So for somebody from the LGBTQAI plus community, it's all the more difficult, right? And there is a lot of negativity around it. Somebody might not even know that the person is a queer person and make comments, and people close to them, their family, their parents, their siblings, close friends. So how do you deal with this kind of negativity that you have seen while growing up?
So when you have seen this kind of negativity, it's very common for people to internalize that, and that's what leads to that self-hatred or the sense of shame and guilt. So that's something that we need to work upon. More often than not, when you have accepted yourself, when you've gone through that journey for yourself, it's it's not very easy, but it's something that's possible, that you address these situations or these, homophobic comments or inappropriate comments that you might experience on a day-to-day basis, and you can stand up for yourself. But if it's something that you yourself have internalized, you're going to carry a lot of shame along with it, so along with yourself. So that's something that you need to address by seeking help, talking to a therapist, and engaging in support groups. Meeting people with similar experiences makes you feel that you're not there out alone. That sense of isolation that is there kind of gets taken away, and that helps you normalize your experience, because it is a part of the spectrum. It is a part of normal experience. It's just that it's not something that's the part of majority, and hence they kind of get marginalized. So just because your experiences are not part of the majority, that does not mean that they are not correct or they are not appropriate. So that's something that needs to be understood. So this, the experiences that you've had are not always positive, but we can always kind of stand up to those at present and make sure that it does not continue. So building awareness and then kind of taking a stand for that.
And it's so difficult because in films and in popular culture, we've seen that queer characters were very often used as comic relief, right?
Yes,
so they or two characters were shown to be queer only to bring in the humor element. So it's all the more difficult for people to be able to stand up for themselves.
Yes, so that's why society is changing, and we see that there's much more representation of queer community and queer experiences, which needs to be out there. Like you rightly mentioned, that earlier it was just for comic relief or just for that comic moment that is there in the scene, that queer people or queer representation used to occur. But now more and more representation is occurring, and that's probably going to help change the narrative, help change the self-identity and self-perception that people have.
Right, and that's also a catch-22 situation, because now social media puts so much pressure on you to look a certain way or behave a certain way if you are from LGBTQAI+, right?
Yes. So I think social media puts that pressure in general on everyone, but if you are from a particular community, all the more the need to fit in and accept it is very high. So that's what's going to happen, that you're going to end up following those trends or reels, even if your partner or you yourself are not comfortable, because that need for validation from external sources is a little heightened. So that's what kind of makes it difficult to understand that this is not something that's helpful, but I still end up doing it because it makes me feel a certain way, it makes me feel accepted or validated. So that's something that's there, definitely.
So what are the ways to avoid falling into that trap?
Kind of not going after validation from external sources. So that's a little difficult. It's not always possible completely, but being more aware, being more self-assured, that works through, looking, like having your journey, going through therapy, and then figuring out that, yes, this is who I am, and I need not always follow reels or trends or, certain popular things that are coming up to kind of get that validation from external sources.
So, if you had to give one message to the queer people who are watching us or listening to us, the one message for them would be to live a wholesome life. What would that message be?
put away the shame and guilt that you have been carrying, if you are carrying that, and always talk about your traumatic experiences and try and resolve them. That's something that allows you to connect with others and yourself much better.
And we should, at the end of the day, remember that just because it's different does not mean that it's wrong. Just because the queer community lives a different life, they have a different choice, does not mean that they're not like us. It's always good to be respectful. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching the episode.
94.3 Radio 1.